happy World Cardmaking Day, everyone. It's Laureen from the Paper and Ink Boutique, and today I'm going to walk you through how I created this card. This is one of 4 cards that I've designed for World Cardmaking Day, and I've used the papers that were included in the World Cardmaking Day kit that you could purchase from our store. It's very simple to make. It's got some interest being a shaped card, and so we're going to go through all these fun little elements. This is the most straightforward of the 4 cards that I made. I used very few products in addition to what was included in the kit. So first of all, I did use white cardstock, so we do include the white cardstock in your kit. Now you may need some additional white cardstock in addition to what came in your kit, but I found that's just my personal preference because I like lots of extra dimension and that kind of thing. I also used the pattern paper. Now I chose from Simply Stated Designs the Floral Academia collection, and I absolutely love it. I just found it to be really calming and got lots of interest, and so these were the 2 papers that I used. This is from the paper 10, and it's the 12 by 12 sheet that has 4 6 by 6 pieces of or different patterns within that sheet of 12 by 12. So these are the 2 6 by 6 pieces that I've chosen. Then in order to create these arches, I've used Spellbinder's Essential Arches etched dies. So it comes in this great set. There's lots of sizes here, and I've used the largest of the arches, and then I used these 2 smaller arches to create the inside cutout and the little bit of a frame. So we'll walk through that in a moment here. I've used the ephemera from the Floral Academia Terrarium Ephemera collection. And as well, I've used one of the sentiments, and that's from the Floral Academia Essentials Ephemera. So it comes with circles and tags and all sorts of great sentiments in that ephemera collection. Of course, some adhesive. I've got my glue gun to the side here, or sorry, my Misty glue press. And then I also used some super fine detail clear embossing powder from Ranger and a Versamarker pen for my sticky ink. And I have my heat tool off to the side. Okay, let's get started. So in advance, I did do some pre-cutting, just in the interest of time, and I'm going to assume everybody knows how to do some basic die cutting. So I went ahead and I did create my 2 large arches using the largest of the dies, and that's going to be the front and back of our card. So you can see this is the back of our card, and then the front of our card. Okay, so I've got my 2 arches, and I did end up using 2 5.5 by 8.5 sized pieces of cardstock. I do find that the arch, it's exactly 4 1/4 by 5.5. So I end up just using bigger panels rather than an A2 size panel to cut my arch, just so that I have that extra room around the sides. But you certainly don't have to do that. You can do it on a regular A2 size panel, which is 5.5 by 4 1/4. Okay, so I've pre-cut those panels, and then I also, using this same die, I've created this arched panel, and I'm going to end up gluing that to the white panel to create this base here. Okay, so that's our next step, is actually gluing the pattern paper to one of the arches. So I'm going to grab my glue press here. I'm just going to focus really on the outside, because ultimately we're going to be cutting out the inside with the smaller arch die. Okay, and I'm going to line that up. Just give that a good press. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 2 arch dies. Now these are the next in size from each other, if you will. And I'm going to take the smaller of those 2 arches and I'm going to center it in the large arch here as the best I can. We're not going to over science this. And I'm going to take some Spellbinders Best Ever craft tape. It's a lower tack tape, and I'm going to keep my arch in place. And I'm going to run that through my die cut machine. Okay, and I'm going to actually keep this middle piece. That can be used for a different project. That off to the side. Okay, now we've created the opening for the front of our card. Okay, so that's the same as this opening here. And now you can see that I've got this little bit of a frame, and that's in this darker, almost like concrete looking paper. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to cut out this frame. And to do that, we're going to use our small arch that we just used to cut out the middle. And then we're going to use the next size up, and we're going to create that little bit of a frame. And we wanted the smaller arch cut out so that the frame will sit along the edges of our cutout piece here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use not only this piece of designer paper, but I've got a piece of scrap paper as well, cardstock, and I'm just going to lay it behind, and I'm going to cut through both of those at the same time so that I get the exact same frame size, because of course we're going to create the frame, and if you run it through your die cut machine and it shifts a little bit, and then you go and try and create another frame, it may not be exactly the same width all the way around. So I like to just cut through at the same time. This is 80-pound cardstock, and this is a little bit of a heavier cardstock as well, but it should cut through just fine. You don't have to do that, but again, I think it creates a nice detail. It's more of a defined frame, because that's really the look that I was going for. So yeah, and that's kind of the level of detail I like to do in my cards. I'm just going to trim this piece of cardstock or paper down first, so it's not quite so large. Okay, so I can use that piece of paper for something else down the road. And then maybe other people have a different way of going about this, but I'm just going to, actually I'm just going to use some temporary adhesive here. And then to make the frame, I like to tape down one of the dies first. Up into the, and then I'm going to lay the smaller one in, and then that way it's a little bit easier to get them aligned, because they tend to move around a little bit. Okay. So you can just eyeball this. Again, nobody's going to notice if it's not a perfectly symmetrical frame, but it just gives a nice little finish to that opening. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. And now I'm going to tape both of those together and run that through my die cutting machine. So I've got both the spare piece of cardstock that's just going to add dimension, and then my designer paper that's going to be the one that shows on top. Okay. And because it is 2 pieces of cardstock, I just ran it through once and back again just to make sure that I got a good clean cut, and you can see. And I'm using the Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cutting machine, and it has no problem getting through both of those layers. Okay, I'm just going to remove my dies. And I'm going to keep the middle piece that pops out because that's going to be the background behind my ephemera piece there. Okay. So there is our frame. There's our 2 pieces. I'll remove that piece of tape here in a moment. But you can see that it's perfectly aligned because we die cut both pieces of paper at the same time. This is a good little trick. Okay. And then just remove the tape from here. Okay. Okay, and now we have our arch piece. I'm going to just set off to the side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and glue these 2 frame pieces together. Said this in my one of my other videos as well. This My Sweet Petunia glue press is wonderful. You can see it, the frame width is not very large, so it's really nice to have this precision glue tip on this. Okay, I'm just gonna glue that together. And at this point, you can also consider inking up the edges. I'm just going to do the bottom here because this is where I had that temporary adhesive. So I'm just going to lift that up, give that a little bit of a glue here. Okay. Okay, I think that looks good. And I am going to just ink up the edges just a little bit, just to give it a bit of depth on the edges, because you can see a little bit of the white frame there. So I'm just taking my VersaFine ink. I've got a little finger dauber, and just going to quickly ink the edges. Just give it a bit of depth. If you didn't want to use black, I would recommend even pumice stone distress ink. That would be a great color as well. I've used that on some of my other cards with this collection of papers and ephemera. It's a beautiful complement. Sorry, I'm out of frame here. Okay, that just helps take a bit of the Okay, and there we have it, our little frame. Okay. Now we can take our frame and actually add it to our arch opening. Just get rid of some of that ink there. You want to be mindful to try and keep the back clean, because this is of course going to be the back of your card, so be mindful of anything that might be on your surface of your work area. Okay, and so then I'm just going to take my glue and run it along the edge of the frame again. we're just going to, I just thought this paper was so cool. Like, to me, it looks like stone or concrete, like I said, and just reminds me of being in Europe with all these beautiful old buildings, and I love the look of it. So I thought that was a really neat way of using these papers together. So there we go. There we've got our little wood, or sorry, brick, concrete, stone frame, if you will. And you can see just adds that little bit of dimension, which I think is cool. Okay, now what we're going to do is create the back of our card. So on here, not sure if you can see, but there's a score line here, and that creates the hinge. There we go. That creates the hinge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my other card base, and I'm going to score along this line at about 3/8 of an inch. You can decide however far down you want, but 3/8 is enough that you're going to have a good area to put your adhesive down, because you're going to of course glue this to your front of your card base that or card front that we've created. Then it still leaves a large amount of space for to write on, because of course we're not writing on the inside of a card. It's not a typical inside of the card, but we'll have all the space on the back. So I like 3/8 of an inch. So just give me one moment to score that. Okay, so I've created my score line here, and now I'm just going to burnish that. Create that nice crease. Use my bone folder. Okay, and now we can actually glue these two together to create our card. So I'm just going to take my adhesive and run it on top where that scored area is. I am being pretty generous with my adhesive because this is the way that it's going to keep our card together, so I don't want a chance of it not adhering well. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to create or take our little arch piece that was from the center of our frame, and we're going to actually lay that and glue it to the back of our card in here. Okay, so one of the easiest ways I found, because this is the exact opening, is I'm just going to put adhesive right into that opening, because we know that's exactly where this piece is going to come, or to go, sorry. And then I'm just going to pop this arch right into this opening. Okay, so now we have that piece done. So there we go. Okay, easy peasy. Just going to set that off to the side now. Now taking the ephemera piece, I thought this was a sweet little succulent, and it's in a terrarium. And so we know that this in real life would be glass. And so what I did was I added one layer of clear embossing powder to that, so you can see a bit of that reflection. This bottom piece here is how the ephemera shows up. It's a bit of a flat coloring. So I thought that it would be neat just to add some clear embossing to make it look like glass. I've done one layer already just in the interest of time, but I'll show you how I did that, because I did actually do 2 or 3 layers on my original card just to give you that really nice fulsome sheen. Okay, so what I did was And I think having a Versamarker pen is probably the easiest because you can control where you're applying your ink, because I don't want it everywhere on this piece of ephemera. I don't want it on the base. I just want it underneath this cloche, right? So there is a brush end, and then there's a bullet point end as well. And I did use the bullet point to go right around the fine edges to create that border. And then I used the brush end to fill it all in. So now that there's already a layer down, it's a little bit easier. And my Versamarker is actually getting close to being dry, but it's still got enough that it'll work for right now, what we need it to do. You can see I'm not being really very careful with this because all we're trying to do is lay down as much ink as possible. I am being mindful around the edges. It's a little bit tricky to see where you've been, especially when there's the first layer down because it's already shiny. But, you know, just try and do the best you can with getting really nice fulsome coverage. Okay. I think that should be good. And then I will bring my embossing powder in. And you can also see if I've missed a few spots. So I did miss a few little things there, but that's okay. We can always go back and add another layer. And I'm just going to heat set that off to the side here. So hopefully you can see, there we go. So you can just see that that extra layer already created a nice finish. And I would probably do one more, but in the interest of time right now, I'll just leave it at 2 coats, but feel free to add more. The really nice thing about Simply Stated papers, even with the ephemera, Chantal at Simply Stated, who we love, and we absolutely love the whole Simply Stated line, uses 80-pound cardstock, so it's a nice weight. So it does take heat embossing really well. Like you can see, there's no warping on that at all. So that's really, really nice. Love that. Okay. Now, the other thing that I did off camera was I actually added some extra white cardstock strips, just some spare cardstock I had laying around, scrap cardstock, just to give a little bit more structure and stability to this sentiment strip, because it is going to go over the opening here, so I don't want it to bend and warp and whatnot. So I just added 2 pieces, and that's a really nice amount of structure to that. I did use white because of course we're going to be able to see that on the back side of our card. So if we go back to our original card, there's a sentiment strip, and you can see that white piece. So want to make sure that you're not using cardstock that's marked up or anything like that, that it's nice clean strips, but I think we all have a lot of those in our stash. Okay, and you could add clear embossing powder over top of the sentiment as well if you wanted to make that shiny as well. I just thought it was appropriate to do it over top of the terrarium glass to give it that glass-like effect, and so I left mine just as it came. But you could also do a little bit of inking, as we did before, around the edges of the sentiment, and I like doing that because otherwise you do get this white edge, and I don't really have much white on this card, so I like to take that starkness off. And again, you could use pumice stone or another neutral colored ink. Anything would work. There's so many different tones in these papers and whatnot. So there, that just took a little bit of the the stark white edge off. Okay, so now we're going to glue our ephemera down, and I'm just doing one layer of, I'm not putting any backer behind this ephemera because it is sitting in the opening. And again, we're just going to, oops, got a little bit of my ink on there, but that's okay. It's going to be covered up. I'm going to try and center this in here again as best we can. Good. I'm just going to add something a little bit heavy to try and set that. And the last step will be to adhere our sentiment. So really, you can see this is a pretty simple card to make, but it does have a lot of interest to it. I find with any shaped cards, I think they're more interesting than just a regular rectangular shaped A2 size card. But yes, but it was very, very simple to pull together when you've got some really interesting papers. So you can imagine any of your pattern papers in your stash, the endless opportunities that you'd have to create something similar to this. Be Christmas themed. You could put like a nice Christmas tree in the middle, or a snowflake, or whatever. Endless options. So while we've used these papers, we're really just hoping to inspire you with anything that's sitting in your stash. It doesn't have to be arches. It could be a circle. You could do squares or whatever other shaped dies that you have. There's so many interesting ones now out there. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to do is add our sentiment. So of course, we're just going to add adhesive to the very edges because we don't want glue across this area in the opening, right? So we're just going to add a little bit of adhesive to the far edges. Let's see, I'm just adding just to the very end here. And I don't want to interrupt some of the little succulents. I think those are so cute. So I think I'll probably just put it more towards the base here. Try and center that. Use my little T ruler. This is a Pear Blossom Press Cardmaker's T-square ruler. I did a little video on it not too long ago, and it's a cool little tool. Okay, just going to give that a little press. Make sure that it adheres. And there we go. We have our neat little arch-shaped card using these beautiful papers from Simply Stated Design from the Floral Academia Terrarium collection. And thanks so much for watching. I hope you've been inspired.